Thank you, Dad.
Okay, we'll begin our workshop. It is absolute pleasure to have lunch with the Teacher Advisory Council. Great discussions, and you can tell we enjoyed that immensely because we had a hard time breaking away from it. So we certainly appreciate, first of all, appreciate you being a teacher and the great job you're doing in the classroom. That is most important, but certainly appreciate the work that you're doing on the Teacher Advisory Council. Continue to hear great things about that, and we just encourage you to continue. So that's fantastic. We certainly enjoyed having lunch with you. Sarah, you go to introduce.
Yes.
Picture of your
So Karen Vogelfang, and I'm not sure I've lost sight of her, is right over here, our current Teacher of the Year. I wanted her just to take a minute to address the group and let us know a little bit more about what you've been learning, what you're doing as a council. This is our inaugural year of having a Teacher Advisory Council. I want to give you a moment. You know, 1 to 2 minutes.
Yes.
I know y'all are fast. First, thank you so much for including us in this opportunity. I could use my loud teacher voice. Let's see. How about that? Thank you for including us in this lunch today. It's been awesome. And it's a real privilege to be here and to be among the Teacher Advisory Council and what we're doing. This is the inaugural group of Tennessee's Teacher Advisory Council. And basically, we're advocates for teachers. We're a voice for all teachers across Tennessee because there's one thing all of us in this room have in common, and that's the benefit of our children in Tennessee to be the best that they can be so that they have choices for their future. We have conducted teacher roundtables over the past couple of months, getting that feedback from our teachers so that we can bring that back to the wonderful people that we're working with at the Tennessee Department of Education in the goal of being transparent and keeping those lines of communication open so that we can do what's best for teachers, so that ultimately we can do what's best for students. So we're looking forward to working with you and becoming even surpassing the goals that we have out there for right now so that we can be the fastest improving, continue to be the fastest improving state in the nation. So thank you for allowing us to be here.
You know, the fastest improving thing is really important for us, and I know that the NAEP testing is starting in schools, so encourage you to encourage the students to do their best. We need to see Tennessee making more improvement than any other state in the nation again. That would be really great, and I'm particularly interested in that because I'm on the NAEP governing board, and when I hear the good compliments that are coming from that board about what's going on in Tennessee, you know, I have a hard time containing myself. So, but it all really depends on what's happening in the classroom and what teachers are doing, and it's so important. We do appreciate being with us today. Would like to mention that I think everybody knows we've got a new board member replacing Teresa. It's William Trout. He's the, I think he goes by Bill, Sarah tells me. He's the president of Rhodes College in Memphis. He's been at Rhodes for more than 10 years, and he really has 30 years as being a college president. He's got an impressive track record of national committees he's been involved in and so forth. He cannot be with us today, but we are certainly looking forward to having him starting with the April meeting and going forward. So that's an important addition to our board. Sarah, do you want to just mention staff changes, where you are with new staff and so forth?
Sure.
This being my first meeting, I am excited to take on the role of executive director and really excited to join the team that Gary has begun building at the State Board office and to work with our tremendous board. I think Phil Pratt will be a great member to an already really strong board committed to doing the best things we can do as a state for students. And I do think it's a great opportunity at this juncture with a new commissioner on board, and we're thrilled to have Dr. McQueen with us today in that role, for us to really think about where we've been as a state and really look forward to where we need to go next. We're not content to be the fastest improving. We've got ambitious goals yet ahead of us, and so I think, again, it's an exciting time to be part of this group. So as Chairman said, we do have two new staff members in addition to myself that I'd like to introduce, and I'm looking here. We've got Nathan James over here, who's joined us as Director of Legislative Affairs. He's going to be taking very seriously our partnership with the General Assembly and ensuring that we have really open lines of communication and partnership with our representatives and senators on the Hill, in addition to doing other policy-related work as part of the board staff team. Nathan most recently has been in Louisiana doing policy work for the governor of Louisiana, but before that was a Tennessee resident and has long ties in the state, and I think is excited, if I don't put words in your mouth, to be back in Tennessee. We're certainly excited to have him. And then also Angie Sanders, who has joined us as our general counsel, and thrilled to have her. She's got experience working in education in Tennessee as well, and comes with a lot of knowledge already, and it has been super helpful to me, I know, as I've been transitioning the last couple weeks in terms of understanding the landscape of the legal complexities of this work. So thrilled to have her join our staff as well, and look forward to continuing to update you on staffing as we move forward. We've got an opening in Scott Evans' position as well that we'll be looking to fill soon.
Okay, great. There. Candace, you want to say anything? It's a new addition to this group also. So.
Yeah, I appreciate being here today, and I believe Sarah and I both are on day 9 of our role. That's right. So I'm sure you're going to lead very well on day 9. But it is exciting to be here. I've had a chance today to actually meet with a group of director schools and also to meet with our advisory council. And I can only say there is an excitement level about the next 4 years under Governor Haslam and the priorities that he set and what we'll be able to do as a state board and state department. And I hope that you feel that same energy because there's a lot that we could do if we work together. So I appreciate being here.
Good. Well, we certainly appreciate having you here, Sarah, and all the things that I hear across the state from the Teacher Advisory Council, the impression that y'all have made on them and others. I think we've got good things ahead, so thank you. Okay, we'll move to our agenda. The first item is the CBOS methodology update. Tony?
All right, thanks for having me today. So this week, the department is announcing 2 updates to the TBOS methodology. That methodology is what we use to measure student growth here in Tennessee. And we're making these changes in response to some educator feedback. So these updates don't require any action on the board's part, but we wanted to be sure to keep you informed about these updates that we are making. So most aspects of the TBOS methodology are determined in accordance with state law, but some elements of the methodology present multiple viable options. This doesn't mean that one option is more or less correct or accurate, but rather that each has its own associated pros and cons that can be weighed, and we can revisit those from time to time, as we've done throughout the long history of TBOS. Today, I'm going to walk through the process we took to weigh our options in these 2 cases. I'll describe the 2 updates themselves, and I'll also describe the rationale for those decisions. So first, the process. We receive a variety of educator feedback, whether from teachers, administrators, district staff, about various aspects of the TBOS methodology. And what we did with that feedback is we had some discussions with SAS, who calculates TBOS, and they helped us understand what our options were for addressing some of the concerns that we were hearing. Following that conversation, we enlisted the help of 2 stakeholder groups to help us weigh the pros and cons. Now, you just met with the Teacher Advisory Council, and we were lucky enough to include them in the process, and their feedback was wonderful and definitely integral in these decisions. We also brought together a group of district stakeholders who have a variety of district perspectives in order to get their take on the pros and cons that we were weighing here. So after getting that feedback, we then made decisions on these two elements of the methodology. The first update relates to the process known as re-estimation. Traditionally, re-estimation has been used in grades 4 through 8, but isn't possible in early grades or end-of-course subjects. Re-estimation examines student performance in subsequent years and can result in typically very small adjustments to prior year scores in a particular subject. Re-estimation very rarely leads to an adjustment in a score that would impact a teacher's TVOS score that is used in teacher evaluation, their overall TVOS composite. The composites used in teacher evaluation have always been final when they're calculated. The thing that re-estimation has updated has been those individual subject year grade scores from prior years that could be considered in future composites. And we received a lot of feedback around this, so we took a hard look at whether re-estimation was a process that we wanted to continue using. So, and the decision we came to is that we're going to move away from using re-estimation in grades 4 through 8. So we weighed the pros and cons, and the decision here, again, is to no longer use re-estimation going forward. There are some sound statistical justifications for using re-estimation, but the process can be difficult to explain, difficult to understand, and that can lead to some concerns in the field. In addition, eliminating re-estimation in grades 4 through 8 brings the TVOS methodology used in early grades and end-of-course subjects into much closer alignment with how it works for teachers in grades 4 through 8. So as a result of those factors, again, the decision there is to no longer use re-estimation beginning with this school year. The second update we considered relates to how we set the expectation for student growth. Previously, in grades 4 through 8, we've used what's called the base year approach. This approach compares student growth to the growth of students with comparable prior achievement in a previous year, which we call the base year. The base year is periodically reset, and most recently has been 2009. So student growth in grades 4 through 8 was being compared to what student growth looked like for students with comparable prior achievement in that 2009 base year. The other option we have here is what's referred to as the intra-year approach. This approach compares student growth to the growth of students with comparable prior achievement in the current year, rather than in a base year. While grades 4 through 8 have always used the base year approach, early grades and end-of-course subjects have always used the intra-year approach. The decision here is to use the intra-year approach moving forward in all grades and subjects. So to continue using it in early grades and end-of-course subjects, but also to begin using that approach in grades 4 through 8. The educator feedback we received here also overwhelmingly supported this update for a couple of reasons. First, as in the case of re-estimation, it has the benefit of further aligning the way that this works for teachers in early grades and end-of-course subjects with the way it works for teachers in grades 4 through 8. It also will lead to less variation in the distribution of scores across grades and subjects in grades 4 through 8. Although the intra-year approach does not guarantee a particular distribution, it greatly decreases the likelihood that the distribution of scores in any individual grade or subject will be skewed. The base year approach, on the other hand, can lead to large variations in scores across different grades and subjects. So for those reasons, beginning this year, again to reiterate, we're going to use that intra-year approach in all grades and subjects. We've begun communicating these changes this week. So we sent out a communication to directors of schools on Tuesday. We've met with both of the groups that provided feedback. We discussed this with the Teacher Advisory Council. who provided us feedback a while back on this and inform them of those decisions, and use that opportunity to talk with them about what communication out to teachers across the state should look like, and that communication will be forthcoming very soon. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to come and present this to you today, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Tony? Any questions? Mike?
I may have missed something, but will there be, in order to do an intra-growth, are we doing an assessment at the beginning of the year and an assessment at the end of the year?
Good question. No, it doesn't require that. So basically what you do is after all the students have taken an assessment in that year, you look at the students' prior achievement leading up to that year, and you compare students' results to students with comparable prior achievement and how they did in that year. Does that help to clarify?
Say yes, Mike.
Yeah, as opposed
Oh,
as opposed to how comparable students would have done in 2009. So you're sort of changing the comparison group of what students you're comparing growth to.
Yeah. Wendy?
Thank you. If you know, what was the rationale before this change to have the two different approaches for 4 through 8?
Sure. So originally, TVOS was developed just with 4 through 8 in mind many, many years ago. And that requires you to give the same test in the same subject year after year. Kids take them in the same sequence. So certain things that you can do there, you can't necessarily do in early grades and end of course subjects. I don't know the full original rationale for the base year, but one rationale is that, as you go year to year, you're comparing sort of to that same previous point in time.
Thank you.
Yes, Ada?
Tony, once again, your rationale on not moving forward with re-estimation. What were you looking at, and what insight, what input did you get that led you to that?
Sure. So re-estimation, like I said, is a process that has some statistical justification behind it. There are some reasons, like I said, there's no one right or wrong answer. But the things that we weighed were how big of an impact does it actually have? And when you look at the impact it actually has, very rarely is it actually adjusting a teacher's score, where at the same time, it's something that works a little bit differently for grades 4 through 8 than it does for other teachers. So that was a huge factor. Another point that we considered is it's something that is nuanced enough that it can be fairly difficult to explain, even though there are sound reasons behind it. So even though that wasn't the primary factor we considered, that weighed into our decision as well.
I think both of these are great changes. The re-estimation thing, I've always thought that only a statistician could love that. It's basically something that didn't add much value and was extremely difficult to explain and to accept. I think that's a good move, and also the base year thing. I think that makes a lot of sense too. I'm confident that these changes will be well received by the teacher community. The two things that I've heard for years have been concerned. I think that these are good changes. Any other questions for Tony? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Good job.
Thank you, Board.
Appreciate it. We'll now move to the approval of the educator preparation providers. Paul?
That work? Well, good afternoon and good to see everybody. And as I was telling the Commissioner McQueen the other day, we were definitely excited for Sarah to move to the state board, but also sad that she was leaving the department. So we are excited for her new role. But I am excited to be here and to bring two topics to you today. One is for our recommendations for program approval for both our teacher and leader preparation programs, and then also I'll pause after that for any questions, and then we'll give a brief update on year 3 on our teacher evaluation and team evaluation at that time. So that's what we'll focus on. On program approval, as you'll see, and you'll see in a moment too, apologize for some of the many acronyms, but important to spell those out. But just as the overview, this is that piece for determining again that the department would bring recommendations for our program and recommendations for final approval for our programs, and the state board having that authority to either grant full approval, to make approval with stipulations, or that denial of approval. And we'll walk through what that looks like. We're in an interesting time right now because we are at this point, the providers are all meeting, must meet the NCATE standards, which are the current standards for our preparation program. And we're evolving and changing to what's called the CAPE standards in 2016. So we have the set that NCATE has been in place, the National Council for the Accreditation of Teacher Education, and that also governs then at the state level the specialty area programs. But we're also moving in this transition out of 2016 with the with the CAPE standards that will come online in 2016. And as we'll talk in a moment, these programs have the ability to be reviewed. These providers that we have on the teacher side and also on the leaders, especially on the teacher side, for through that NCATE CAPE process, which is more of the national focus versus the state-managed review. Now, that's quite a mouthful, but that's different from our leader prep programs. We have 20 leader prep programs in the state. They are reviewed by the department, and the recommendations that we bring to you are all governed by the current leadership policy that was passed in 2008 and amended in 2011. So just for the background on the program approval on the teacher side versus those that are on the leader side. And we'll go through both briefly of what that looks like for those programs and for those providers that are here. So what we're bringing today is 5 programs that for recommendation for the continual approval process, and these are the 5. As you see, 4 are through that NCATE CAPE accreditation process, and then 1 is elected, and programs have that ability to elect to go through the state process or the national process. Both have the same process, the same standards. It's a little bit like when teachers elect to go for national board certification. It certainly doesn't prevent them from still having their Tennessee license. So we have one institution with Wells College that decided to stay at the state level and not for the approval at the joint level, if that makes sense. So those are the 4, and the process is pretty detailed in terms of the review that both it's a joint process between the CAPE national reviewers and the department that are engaged in that review process of programs when they come up for approval. That is a pretty extensive process that requires site visits. Those site visits are generated in a report that are reviewed, that are scored with a lot of input, and then those recommendations are coming to you at this time. And those are the 4 that are there, along with the 5th one on the same process. So what that means for right now is that approval process grants the providers for a 7-year accreditation, and the 4 that you see in the top have met all standards that are for those CAPE standards, and those are the 4 institutions. Granted, we have over 40 teacher prep programs in the state. They don't all come up, as we know, for program approval at the same time, depending on when that cycle starts and ends. And that's so that's why we're looking at those 4 that have met for the 4 years. For the full, meeting all the standards. One institution then is full approval under 2 years. Critical deficiencies were identified from this one institution and the provider Lemoyne Owen, and they have the opportunity and the responsibility to provide evidence in the next year that will be conducted on a site review by those reviewers that are both a joint CAPE reviewers, again, at the national level, and the Tennessee Department of Education. that are providing a full site review and feedback to identify and see if they have that opportunity for in the next year to rectify that process. So that's why it's different. For normal full approval is the 7 years. They fall under that one with stipulations that triggers the site visit as per policy with that. And so that's that overview for that review. That site visit's required to happen in the next calendar year, so that is a 12-month window that is required to be conducted and carried out. And then that recommendation will be given back to the department to make the recommendation to you based on the update if they were able to correct those deficiencies that have been identified. Just quickly, yeah.
Move on, just,
sure.
The only consequence for one with stipulation is this review within the next year, right?
Right.
No other consequence associated with this.
Right. Correct.
Mike?
So, I got some questions. A student goes through an accredited program. I should know this. They graduate. Do they take an exam before they get a license?
They are required to take the praxis, correct.
And as part of the accreditation, the number of students that are meeting adequate level on that practice.
Right, there's a series within those standards that would measure, and that would be one of the buckets or one of the standards would be there.
To what extent on your review are you using outcome data as opposed to income data?
Yeah, great question. And I think, we saw with the passage of this educator prep policy in this last year that that's the greater focus now on kind of the impact and the outcome measures. And that is a shift, and it's something we'll also talk about on the leader side of where we're heading, because that's not directly signaled in the on the leadership policy side, but an area we'll want to move towards and what we did on this last review process. But that's certainly contained down. I think that's also the intent of moving to the CAPE standards in 2016. And I know both the commissioner being very familiar and having information about those highly impactful outcome measures, especially linked to items like evaluation, like retention, that districts are retaining highly effective teachers, are part of both the current standards, but also even more significantly in the CAPE standards. And Commissioner, if you wanted to add, or if you had
I would say as we're moving toward the CAPE standards, and that's going to be more evident in other types of approval, you will see not only the input side, but much greater emphasis on the outcome.
Right. I think that's the intent. So we'll move just quickly to on the instructional leader side. We really have 4 areas of focus. As you all know, it's been brought a couple things. One, that the current policy is from 2008, and it had we'll call the old TILs. We went through that process of revising that through a year-long process with LEAs, with educators, with principals in our prep programs to really reflect the changing nature of the work of administrators. Because I think we all know that in the last 5 years, and I know having been a former principal, the shifting nature of leadership and the importance, if it's the second most important factor for driving student achievement, we try to really capture that on the revised TILs to show that changing nature of the work. And one real quick example would be, I know 5 years ago, many assistant principals were not engaged in the team evaluation process. And that's been a huge shift over the last 5 years, so that now a vast majority of our assistant principals have to know what good instruction looks like. And that's what's also captured in the TILs, in the revised TILs. The other piece is also, just like on the teacher side, trying to really capture on the leader prep program review the outcome metrics. Again, what are those high impact areas, and getting tighter on that. Really focusing on the quality of the evidence that we're asking leader programs to provide, as opposed to the quantity that often referred back to a lot of those input, we call input measures. So here, many of the programs that went through this review process on the leader side appreciated that opportunity both to provide feedback and to provide targeted evidence. So the evidence, again, was not everything but the kitchen sink, but rather targeting the 4 areas that are highlighted in the leadership policy around curriculum, around selection, around assessments of the candidates as they're going through there. And so that's where we've been in the last year. I want to give you a quick update of what that is and also the recommendations. So this is just backtracking to last April with the tools that were sent out to all the leader prep programs around the review process for feedback by our division. Those were revised, and we hosted a webinar back in May. Programs were required over the summer to submit evidence, very targeted evidence for those 4 areas aligned to the leadership policy. We were then conducting and holding and creating review teams that were made up of leader prep program individuals, K-12 leaders, and also members of the department. And that process also, I think, further strengthened the feedback loop between the 20 programs and us. All the programs had an opportunity then to provide feedback and to make adjustments based on that initial opportunity and that initial scoring. And then their results, I think you have the overview of the summary of the recommendations that we're now bringing to you today on the leader prep side. So that's just a real quick overview of the process to make it pretty thorough. These are, again, the 4 areas that those leader prep programs were being held against as defined by the leader policy around the quality of the partnerships. And I do have to emphasize, again, that one in particular is relatively new. To think about what do those high-quality partnerships really look like between districts and leader prep programs. And that's an area where we're going to continue to push and really push, as we hear from a lot of our superintendents, wanting to have strengthened partnerships with these leader prep programs to really increase the pool of leader candidates coming into those programs and then being ready to go into those districts. So I think that's an area that is a real point of emphasis. Certainly selection, curriculum, and then the practicum, those 4 areas are aligned as well. That takes us, just as mentioned, the review team composition was made up of individuals from the leader prep programs, from individual schools and principals and teachers, and then also other organizations like TOS and TEA. That had an opportunity to really think critically about what the feedback that they were given for their own program. And again, this is just the quick review. But similar to the teacher prep side, you have the 3 areas that the recommendations would include full approval for these programs, that they've then met or exceeded expectations on the rubric for those 4 areas. Conditional approval with minor stipulations, and we'll show that briefly in a moment what that looks like, for meeting 3 out of the 4 criteria, and then finally major stipulations, which would be not meeting expectations for fewer than 3 out of those 4. And then that would also trigger, like on the teacher side, an on-site review for those programs. So on the leader side, we had, out of those programs, we had these 16 programs that had met or exceeded expectations for the full approval that you see there. And then also the 4 that are in that different category, 1 with the minor stipulations. And just important to note that University of Tennessee Chattanooga had voluntarily requested the extension for a year to be in better alignment with the revised TIL standards. So as many of you know, that's a significant undertaking to make sure your program is aligned to a revised set of standards. And they voluntarily wanted a year to make sure all their course content was in direct alignment to the revised instructional standards. The 3 you have below that meant that in those 4 content areas that there were significant stipulations for those 3 providers, and that will trigger certainly the on-site visit, similar to what we have on the teacher side as well. And that's what we see here, right? So you have the 3 that, again, you have the summary for those 3 that are on the major stipulations. That would trigger the site visit and also the feedback for improvement, and that we would take again that recommendation back to you for either the approval for full, or going from major possibly to minor, or for the denial, that the state board has that authority. So it leads to the next steps about the one program with UTC having the minor stipulations, having the opportunity to submit more evidence, the on-site visits for the major stipulations, those 3 programs. But also say we are looking very carefully at the current leadership policy and how do we continue to strengthen and make it match the changing nature of the work for principals that are facing today around all those areas, right, and what that looks like. So I think those are where we're heading on the next steps. All of those programs had been conditionally approved in 2011, and so that's why it was certainly time to make sure that this process unfolded now to give the feedback and to point for greater areas of improvement. So I will pause at that point because we will go to switching to evaluation update. I'm sorry to speed through, but I know time is of the essence today too. For questions on the leader prep side.
Okay, Mike?
So, were these schools given conditional approval in 11?
Yes, all of the programs were at that time.
And now we're looking at approving 4 with stipulation.
Correct.
Is there what's the time frame, and does it automatically sunset on that anniversary day?
So the process would be for the major stipulations for the site review in the next year, and then bringing that feedback back to the board to determine with a recommendation of either granting full or going back to in the opposite direction. If there was a revocation or denial, then at that point that would stop in terms of admitting new candidates. Candidates that are already there would be allowed to continue. The candidates that it would stop if it was a revocation or a denial, if that makes sense.
There will be a date certain established that they will know whether they're go or no go.
Right.
Other questions? Yeah, Cheryl?
I'm just a little bit interested in your opinion about at least two of our larger state universities, and I get somewhat surprised that they weren't able to, with the resources they have in hand, and then those departments weren't able to have a better score sheet. And I looked at the agenda items we have tomorrow. What keeps them from getting over the hurdles of these?
Yeah, you're referring to the 3, especially on the, yeah. And I think, right. Part of that is in the process, one, that there were multiple eyes looking to see within those 4 content areas, for the reliability and the validity of the feedback. Especially in those 3, it did cut across, except for the one from Bethel, which I think had below the level of ad expectation in 2 of the 4 areas. The other 2, I think, were across all 4. I think the big picture answer would be because of the revision of TILs signaled kind of, again, the shifting role of a leader, that requires some significant time and work if your program had not already even started taking some of those steps for the revision, right? And just that one piece, and that's within the curriculum part. But then, as we know, curriculum would drive the alignment of the assessments that would have to follow from there as well, and some of the feedback that's being given throughout the program. And I'm sure at scale, that can also be a challenge for some of the larger programs as well.
Well, I guess the question I have is whether across the state our teacher preparation programs are really as good as this assessment indicates. With by far the majority of the programs having a 7-year approval, I just wonder if our expectations or standards are high enough whether we're that good.
Well, I think we certainly see a range, and I think just like in any transition to an elevated, we all want that same end goal, right? Is quality candidates being prepared and being aligned to the realities they're going to face. And I think that's where we see programs in different stages of that alignment and that transition. But I think that's that piece we all want to see, and programs are working towards. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge as we're just like as we see on the 141 districts we have, also trying to make that challenge of adapting both to evaluation and rigorous standards. Right?
As we improve our data systems, ability to collect data, will we move more to the outcome measures for these programs?
Yeah, I think especially that's a great point. I'll talk about that in a moment, especially on the leader side, because some of those data points are understandably different than on the teacher side. So, for example, placement of leaders coming out of a program into a district is often not as linear as what we see on the teacher side. In terms of the number of years, in terms of in our rural districts, the amount of actual openings for leaders. And so I think we're trying to be very deliberate about defining and having a new data system that we'll talk about coming online this summer will really start to allow us gain a better handle on what should those ultimate outcome metrics be, especially on the leader side, as you're pointing out. And I think the data system will really help because some of those are different, understandably are different than what we see on the teacher side for it. And I think that's where the data system is going to really help.
Yeah, that was actually the point I wanted Paul to share a little bit more about. I think to your point, Chairman, while this latest interim review revealed some deficiencies that we're taking steps in the department to address, I do think moving forward, like we'll see with the key standards, thinking about outcomes in a more meaningful way as part of the future review of leader prep will be really important. So as Paul explained, there's some challenges there. Think about the data and getting it right and making sure it's reasonable to hold, these new metrics, hold the programs accountable. So I think that certainly is the focus that we're moving in that direction. It may take a little bit longer. But I am pleased to note, actually, Amy Wooten was also on the teacher leader division with her team and today working with other states on some of those issues. So I think to the extent possible as a state, we're out in front on that. But I think we have to keep pushing to really hone in on those outcomes, both for the teacher prep side as we're in the process of doing it also for the leader.
Yeah, and I think that's where the CAPE standards will provide some of that roadmap that we can really take on and then even elevate as we head into it.
Other questions?
Oh, this is for my own edification. Help me walk through this. I saw when you had Lemoyne on college 2 years, and going back to what Carolyn was saying about 2 of our major universities that have the resources, have you seen a difference with the historically black colleges and universities not sometimes having the resources? I saw with Tennessee State, they have it several years. But I would like to get a feel for you. What have you seen with historically black colleges and universities being able to move up to that standard?
Right. I think, that's a great question. I think our primary role and responsibility is being as clear as possible about both what those targets are and how to really have, for example, a candidate assessment system, which is one of the challenges for that particular institution you mentioned. And then what kind of supports can be provided, right, for both identifying within the university and also from the state. And I think now it's like that roadmap is clear because I think that first part is what we have not had in the past, which is around program approval on the leader side, is really, I think everyone does better about what is the target, right? Where are we heading? What do we need to do in order to be intentional about resources to hit this target? And I think that's the phase one or the first part. And now it's at the same time then giving an opportunity, now that the target is clear, for them to go back and figure out how those resources can be allocated to better meet the target and to do that. And I think, and that's why it's not across the board with our HCBUs, but it is, right, it is certainly challenges for different institutions.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. You're on a roll here. Evaluation update.
We'll go to, this is not bringing any recommendations, but simply an overview of where we've been from last year with evaluation. And I know for Dr. Habern as well has done a lot of work on that. It's exciting to share some of this from last year and also kind of the big picture of what those updates will be on the team model. So just a quick review is you know, we're in year 4 now on team evaluation, and what that meant going back to the first of the TOP Act, we've had in the first year implementation in 11-12, and then we've had a evaluation report come out every year, and we're getting ready to release a year 3 report that will be at the end of February for capturing trends that we saw from last year. So those are kind of the major milestones of what that means. What we saw certainly prior to last year were some changes, listening to feedback from all of our districts about a greater and more rigorous certification exam for all of our evaluators, adding additional team coaches, which has made a huge impact, working with principals specifically on getting stronger in schools where there was identified significant misalignment between observation and growth scores. And that's had a big impact positive impact from previous 2 years, and now we actually have 8 team coaches that are in effect for working with those districts. Certainly new portfolio growth measures for some of our non-tested subjects and increase for world language. The pilot last year, which is actually last year on the administrator side with 10 districts, and now the full implementation with aligned to the revised TILs of our principal evaluation rubric. Also, the piloting of the tripod student survey in 22 districts. Again, that was prior to last year. And then finally, K-5 PE teachers in 3 districts with a portfolio growth measure as well. From last year specifically, we do see, some interesting trends and some positive trends, and also through the process of feedback. Stronger relationships certainly between student achievement indicators and principals getting better as evaluators at effectively identifying, especially our high-performing teachers, and getting more comfortable. We'll talk about flexibility in a moment and how that process has helped principals. Number of teachers receiving the individual growth scores continues to grow. Certainly now, I believe we're just over 40%, about 41% of teachers have that individual growth score. Struggling observers through the team coaches and working with our team coaches for helping to develop stronger ways to evaluate. The tripod student surveys were approved for inclusion and currently are being used in 3 districts after that pilot year as well. And then finally, the modifications through the local flexibility. I think this is really one of our main points is how do we continue to support districts and have them have ownership over evaluation through flexibility. And we have over 80 districts now using some type of flexibility around evaluation, and we'll highlight that in a moment. Just want to point out quickly that that's continued over 3 years to have a better correlation between observation scores and growth scores, and that's certainly true in year 3, which is the lighter line. And it's maybe a little hard to see, but this might be a little clearer to show it this way, which is showing from year 1, if you look at for level 5 teachers, there was actually a pretty significant gap for our level 5 teachers, about 16%, between those that had a level 5 growth score and those that received and earned a 5 on their first year observation score. If you jump up to the top for level 5, that actually is narrowed down to about 3.5%. in terms of the idea of teachers earning an individual growth score of a 5, and then those that also, through observation, are receiving a 5. So over those 3 years, a closer and a reduction of that gap, especially for evaluators getting stronger at understanding and recognizing strong and effective teaching. I think that's encouraging with that piece. We also know that that's not always have to be hand in hand, that the matching between a 5 and a 5. That doesn't always go hand in hand, but important that the misalignment, as we define, is not greater than 3, certainly 3 levels, and to see that. So that's also encouraging as we see. Changes for this year, just as an update, we saw for growth measures for portfolios certainly being expanded in PE, and that's actually 3 districts right now, Shelby, Clinton, and Wilson. We have the pilot for the pre-K growth model also in 3 districts, including Knox, Metro Nashville, and Jackson-Madison. Full implementation of the principal evaluation rubric. We just ended the first cycle, so all those scores and that feedback has happened in this first semester on the principal evaluation side. Interesting, what's not up here is we have some districts that are using a teacher perception survey on a voluntary basis that allows teachers to give feedback like the student survey about their administrator. And we have districts that are employing that as a way to get feedback, especially for superintendents, to help score principals through teacher perceptions. And again, that's voluntary, but an opportunity as a tool for teachers to provide feedback as well. The student surveys, again, that show growth and are being used currently in 3 districts. We have a couple other student survey instruments that are being piloted, and also the flexibility, as I mentioned, to customize the state model. And I think that's where we also see, as we know for a lot of teachers, we hear loud and clear more feedback, more specific feedback, more timely feedback. And so that flexibility option around multiple observers, co-observations, allows for a piece of that flexible feedback and to be granted. So those are just kind of the big buckets for that. And then looking ahead, certainly we have these 6 areas, some that we just touched upon, and Sarah had mentioned earlier on the data system of where we want to go. Certainly with student surveys like the teacher perception survey, there were some issues in the pilot about frequency and turnaround time of providing feedback. And I think there's, with new vendors coming online to provide a similar instrument, that's going to be helpful, and also for faster feedback to be given back to schools. The 15%, with the state law, continue to get feedback about what that says now that teachers have the final say, and continuing to listen and get feedback around that achievement measure as well. The data system that Sarah mentioned will be coming online this summer, and I think the key with the data system is really a couple key points. One, better data quality, right? We'll have a cleaner, more flexible way of tracking data. That the integration is really a single point of entry for districts. So they'll have, for HR especially, it'll be the single point between licensure and evaluation. Right now we have 2 completely separate databases for licensure and evaluation data, and that'll all be merged almost in the Walmart approach of databases, so that we have one single stop shop for the access point for educators. That will be launched this summer at the end of this school year, going forward into next year. And that'll allow for better reporting and also for capturing, as we mentioned earlier, even linking licensure and placement coming out of prep programs as well. So really excited about, I think, having that integrated data system coming online this summer as well. Final point just on assessment transition, and so this may be a little blurry, but just a reminder that we saw the last time we had shifted to more rigorous standards in 09-10, that while there was a decrease certainly in student achievement scores, that the TVOS growth scores were relatively stable, in fact, very stable from the year before, going to the elevated standards in 09-10, and then throughout. And so that idea that I don't think we'll see a huge shift in evaluation scores despite the move to the revision of the standards, just like we saw 5 years ago as well. So do that. And then finally, last point is again, connecting that data, licensure and evaluation data, to be in the same data system. Also, we're doing some really innovative work, I believe, coming out of helping districts think now about this idea of the teacher and evaluation data and how to help them get better, and also related to hiring, retention, recognition, and placement. Districts are really hungry for what does that look like to help think more carefully about hiring, about who you're retaining, because we know that historically we've had districts, even nationally, lose highly effective teachers at the same rate as struggling teachers. And we want to be more intentional about retaining those that are having the biggest bang for the buck. So there's a lot of ground to cover, but wanted to make sure you had that overview. All of this will be in the year 3 report that will be coming out next month as well. That will be sent to all of you as well. So this time I will stop and see if there are any other questions before we move on.
Wendy?
Sure. Dr. Fleming, can you go back to the slide that had the level 1 through 5 and with observation versus growth?
Is that for that one?
That one. So I just had to look at it quickly.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. So it's great that the level 5 numbers seem to be coming together, but is there any conversation? I mean, and level 3 seems to stay.
Right.
I guess people like to think people are average. I don't know. But level 1 is disturbing to me, and level 4.
Yeah, and partly, good point. Partly for level 1, we have more teachers identified, and we're receiving that were eligible for individual TVOS scores.
Okay.
So that was part of it. But there's also that notion of continuing, and this is where our team coaches have been so valuable, to continuing to work with districts to make sure the alignment is as close as possible in providing the feedback, especially for those districts that in schools, particularly that would have significant misalignment. So it's kind of both factors are happening at the same time.
Okay. And then level 4 looks like it's a pretty broad. I mean, is it that those are on the TVOS that they're close, like level 3 or level 5, just barely, and that's where it just looks like a big difference between observation and results.
And I think that's the intent of continuing to work and support districts through flexibility, for the ownership of that the model works for the district and it has those pieces that are going to provide and move and help support teachers, especially as you noted in the middle, like our level 3, level 2, level 3, real important.
Thank you.
So.
How dynamic will the data system be?
I'm sorry?
How dynamic will the data system be? Will we be able to do drill down analytics? Will you be able to look at cohorts of anything and compare them to other cohorts and make strategic? Will you be able to look at graduates from a particular school prep program, follow and pull them out over a 3-year period and see what their evaluations are? Or can you look at kids of a certain demographic across the state and see how they are performing as opposed to other cohorts of kids?
Yes, and I would say because that's certainly the intent and the goal, especially on the licensure side, being able to track as they're coming out of, both on the teacher and principal side, coming out of programs and having a clean set of data with their licensure information and their evaluation data. That right now requires additional steps because of the
But is it built to create cohorts to isolate?
Let's see if Courtney, I don't know if you had, or Laura. Laura, you would probably be the one on that. If I'm just going to ask for Laura Uncle to see it on the yes. Come on over here. Yeah, she's done a lot of work on our database, but that's
absolutely. Yeah, so the system, the way that is currently in development and designed is that it'll be the licensure component and the evaluation component. So there won't actually be student data that's in there, but because we will be using the teacher license number as the identifier to link all the data, we'll be able to more clearly link to some of our other data systems that have got student assignment information as it pertains to which teachers teach which particular students. And on if Paul was speaking to your other question on being able to kind of pull cohorts of teachers to track them back to an institution, there should be some of that capability. We're still trying to decide, what are the right access points and what are the right pieces of information for different parties to be able to see. So we will have completer information where a teacher completed their preparation program available in the system, and now we're working through the process of figuring out exactly what our dynamic reporting features are going to look like and trying to prioritize which reports come online in this first year of implementation of that system. But we're very actively thinking about how do we merge all of these different data pieces together to create the best data system we can that's got the best information for all parties involved, both on the LEA side and for our educator preparation programs. This should be especially exciting for them. There hasn't been a data system for them before to be able to look at some of the information about their completers.
I would encourage the state as the end game to look at data not only as a source of information, but a source of knowledge. And that really takes it to where you're able to do analytics easily if the information is data is there. It's a matter of how to extract it. It's a matter of how it's built.
Absolutely, and I think this will be a big step forward in dynamic reporting and letting districts be able to kind of drag and drop metrics and create their own reports rather than having to rely on us to have a set of stock reports that we push to them. They should be able to do some more reporting on their own.
Great.
Okay, other questions? Well, refreshing on the student surveys, the current evaluation we've got looking ahead, we're currently are or not using student surveys.
So they are, right, they are an approved option. We have 3 districts that two are using it for 5%, and there's a window between 5 and 15% as an approved option. I think that'll continue to grow, but it's certainly, when we talk about that flexibility, that's one way for districts to use it, but not mandatory at this point, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Do we have any feedback on how the districts that are using it feel about it?
Yeah, I think overall, even the ones that were in the pilot, and some of them did have challenges with the turnaround time from the vendor of providing between the first and the second application of the surveys. Feeling, even though there's some of those glitches do occur, that it's a way to provide pretty reliable feedback from students, even regardless of age level, right? So that, yeah.
Sure.
I can just add a little bit to that. Again, I think the student survey component is really intriguing, and as a former teacher, I would be my own student survey because they really know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. It's about getting the questions to a place where they're reflecting the day-to-day activity. And one thing that's exciting is that there's multiple vendors now in this space. It was that we were using TriPod, and that was the only vendor. There was some concern sometimes about the usability of the teacher reports that came back through that first survey iteration. And so now that there's more options, I think the vendors are all thinking about how to make the reports and the information, as Mike was saying, real knowledge sources for teachers. I mean, it only is helpful if it provides information in a timely and usable way for teachers to help them improve their delivery of instruction. And so I think while we're seeing this year fewer districts using surveys at state, I think it's a part that they're exploring some of these new options before they commit to using them as part of evaluation. Yeah. But I'm encouraged that there's more vendors in the space that are thinking about the usability of the reports for teachers. So I think it'll continue to evolve, hopefully, in a good way.
Yeah, especially as you noted in real time. So that's the key for teachers is wanting to get that feedback from the evaluators. So,
yeah. I just believe that we ought to do everything we can to promote that. I just can't help but believe it's a valuable source of information there that we've not been utilizing.
Yeah.
Important piece of information that we need. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, thank you, sir. Good job. Appreciate it. Cambridge program. Sammy? Okay.
Good afternoon. The C&I division and CTE division worked jointly on this Cambridge proposal, and so would like to present this afternoon jointly as well. And so we're going to start with Emily Carter from CTE.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I really want to just provide some context and background for the proposal that you're going to hear tomorrow and take up on first read to create a Cambridge pathway to a Tennessee diploma. So, as a state, as we focus on creating students who are college and career ready, my office in particular works on expanding and promoting early post-secondary opportunities as a way to really prepare students. And part of that is also ensuring that we have a robust portfolio available for schools and districts to choose from. And so right now we have dual enrollment, we have dual credit, advanced placement, international baccalaureate courses, and Cambridge would fall into this portfolio. It would help us expand these opportunities. The proposal that we're talking about today focuses specifically, on the Cambridge secondary programs and the courses and exams that can be used towards college credit. Just a little bit of background on the Cambridge program itself. Cambridge International Examinations is an organization that's part of the larger Cambridge Assessment Division at the University of Cambridge. Over 160 countries right now have the Cambridge education programs right now. And like I mentioned, we're focused on the secondary today, but they do offer programs for students ages 5 to 19. And then I also just want to mention, I know we are short on time, but if you want to look at the process that Cambridge goes through for reviewing courses and assessments, they provide that online with their Code of Practice and Cambridge Approach. So it's very accessible and transparent to see exactly what they're doing with the courses and exams. So the two secondary programs that we're focused on today I'm going to refer to as IGSE and ACE, just because it's a long name, but they're certificate programs. So IGSE is the International General Certificate, and it's really more for the 9th and 10th graders. And there's a broad group of subjects that schools can pick from to really create a curriculum that matches the needs of their students. And the key with the IGSE courses is that they're helping prepare the students for more advanced coursework, for AP, IB, the AS and A-level Cambridge. One thing that we've seen as we've tried to expand early post-secondary is the importance of making sure we have that pipeline of students, that they're actually prepared to take advantage of the courses in their junior and senior year. So that's where the IGSE courses come in. The advanced secondary programs, I'm going to just talk about in two components. There's the ACE courses, which is the Advanced International Certificate. Again, this is for our 11th and 12th graders. Sometimes our sophomores can be in this as well. The courses, I'm just going to describe this because the course list that you have, you'll see AS and A level. The AS level really refers to a 1-year course of study, and the A level being 2 years. There's tests for both of those levels, and post-secondary credit is awarded for both types of tests depending on the institution. The ACE diploma is something that students can earn by going through a particular set of requirements set by the Cambridge organization, and it really just is so that they can show mastery across multiple subjects. And they base that on the courses and exams that are really internationally recognized and also widely accepted for college credit. And I want to just mention before, sorry, Tammy's going to go more specifically into what's available in Tennessee. But again, part of the reason we're here today in the context is that we actually do have schools in Tennessee that have gone through the Cambridge approval process. And we want to make sure that we can align our state policies with what they're trying to do to expand opportunities for students and look at the pathway where they would count towards graduation requirements.
So like Emily said, we do have some schools that have already been through this process. And so in order for a school to be a part of the Cambridge network of schools, they would have to participate in a very rigorous application process. Two things that are a part of that process is one is a school site visit, and then one is actually very rigorous kind of application. And some of the things that are included in that is really looking at the mission and educational values of the school, looking at their educational management and leadership, looking at the approach that the school takes to teaching and learning, and really looking at the way in which that the physical environment supports teaching and learning within that school. Once the schools are approved through Cambridge, then CIE actually provides a pretty extensive support network for those schools. Some of the things included in that support network are face-to-face training, online training, webinars, discussion forums. They also have a very robust variety of instructional and assessment resources and tools that teachers can use, and they have an extensive support system for the building level administrators as well. So they really do support that school once the school has been approved to be a part of their network. In Tennessee, we have 2 districts that have Cambridge schools currently, and one of those is Bradley County, and one is Metro Nashville. So I apologize. So the course content and frameworks within each Cambridge course has been carefully reviewed by not only by CTE but also CNI as well. And so the department review team, we found a clear alignment between the Cambridge course content and between Tennessee standards for 6 courses: English Language Arts, Science, Mathematics, Foreign Language, Fine Art, and Physical Education. After we did a careful review of the rest of the courses, we did not find a clear alignment between the Cambridge content and Tennessee standards, and that was for 3 areas, and that was social studies, personal finance, and wellness. So the Cambridge pathway that's proposed in your packet would require that students still take the Tennessee state-approved courses for those 3 areas: social studies, wellness, and personal finance. So thinking about institutes of higher education and students receiving college credit for Cambridge courses, the state and public, the state public and private post-secondary systems each have at least one institution currently that awards college credit for Tennessee graduates. You have a list of those current institutions in your packet as well. And additionally, prior to bringing this proposal to you, the Cambridge Pathway, we worked with TBR and UT systems to provide their institutions with information on the proposed pathway so that they could review the course content to ensure that admission requirements would be met for our graduates. In your packet, you'll see a document that's titled Cambridge Program Pathways to Tennessee Diploma. This document details the courses that a student can take to meet Tennessee graduation requirements. The first page is just kind of informative, it's just information, but page 2 and page 3 of that document has a chart and then aligns side-by-side Cambridge courses with the Tennessee graduation requirement, or it also notes where those 3 courses I mentioned previously, students would have to take the approved Tennessee course as well. Students that complete the Cambridge Pathway would earn a Tennessee high school diploma. Along with the Pathways document in your packet, you also have a sampling of Cambridge courses listed for you to look at and review. And as the Cambridge community grows, we know that they will add courses. Similar to AP and IB, we propose that Cambridge would fall under the State Board rule minimum requirements for the approval of public schools. Under this rule, local education agencies, they would annually approve a list of Cambridge courses. The department would also like to recommend that any student who completes the Cambridge pathway that's been proposed would meet the requirements to be recognized as graduating with state distinction. And I also would like to at this time recognize that we have 2 individuals in the audience. We have a representative from Cambridge here with us, Sherry Reach, and then we also have a representative from Metro Nashville that currently has Cambridge schools, and that's Matt Nelson. And so at this time, along with Matt and Sherry, Emily and I would be glad to answer any questions about Cambridge.
Lindy?
I have a few questions. How many high schools in Bradley County and Metro Nashville currently offer the courses?
So I'm going to ask Matt to answer for Metro.
Here in Metro, we have 4 high schools that have the program. So we have Cambridge High School, McGavick, Overton, and White School.
Okay.
I'm not sure about Bradley.
Yeah. Bradley just one.
Did you all come over here so you can be captured on the mic? Thank you.
And if I can, how long has Metro Nashville? I won't hold you to Bradley.
Bradley has 1 school.
Right, but how long has Metro Nashville had
We're in our 2nd year of implementation in Metro Nashville, and we're doing a year-by-year rollout. So we're in our 2nd year, so only sophomores are in Cambridge courses at this point.
Okay, and I have one more. Is that all right? Is the process for students to enter that program, is it a selective process, or can students just sign up for the classes, and as long as they're able to complete the classes, they're fine?
There is a selection process because of the scheduling component, because we have a certain number of teachers that can teach the courses. So students will demonstrate that they have the work ethic and the ability to maintain the level of rigor expected in these courses. But other than that, there isn't any dead set barriers. We don't withhold students to access these courses other than filling an application saying that they want to and that they have the ability and work ethic to succeed.
And I lied. I asked one more.
That's
how
what
many?
you said last time.
I do have a lot. You're used to me, Glenn.
Across the world and in the United States, across the United States, the policy that students participate is up to the individual school district. We have some schools that open policy for anyone that wants to do a FASB pre-April IGCSE portion of the examination.
Okay, great, thank you. And how many students in Metro Nashville are participating?
So as I said, we're rolling it out. So right now we only have freshmen and sophomores at the high school level, and we're probably talking about 250 total students that are accessing the IGCSE courses. And then we have about 100 students that are in ACE level courses at the sophomore level. So those would be the upper advanced students that are able to complete that coursework in their sophomore year.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Go back to Ruby's first question. What are the high schools? I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
Sure. In Metro, we have Cane Ridge High School, McGavick, Overton, and Whites Creek.
I got two of them.
Mike?
So I'm pretty familiar with IB. How would you, what are not similar, but what are the differentiators?
I think, I don't know either, because Metro has both IB and Cambridge. I don't know if you want to speak to what it looks like.
The way I explain it, because I oversee all the advanced program, what we call the advanced programs, the way I explain it is the major differences are the program requirements. In other words, how students work towards earning an international diploma. The high level of expectations, the deep critical thinking components, the flexibility within course offerings, a lot of that is similar. But in terms of earning a Cambridge diploma, there are a few different intricacies as opposed to earning an International Baccalaureate diploma. And so we try to describe those, but they're both considered high-level, internationally focused curricula that we're grateful that we have the opportunity to offer it to our families and students in the district.
May I add one other difference, please? Or maybe two. Another difference is with the Cambridge program, we actually have an aligned curriculum system which includes courses that we write and assessments and professional development for grade 9, 10 that are standardized across 160 countries, in addition to the same level of courses of the same nature at the highest level, which they can possibly earn credit by Stanford University.
IB doesn't have standard courses.
No, they have, well, I don't know if you, I would ask you to ask IB officials about that, if I may. Sorry. It's not curriculum specific, it's curriculum specific courses.
I got you. So, to either Sarah or Candy, is this a question of, I may misuse the term articulation, or that you all have to review what the Tennessee standards are, look at what their curriculum is, and see if you agree that it is sufficiently adequate to match up.
Correct.
And is that a nightmare for you?
Well, that was it.
Yeah, well, see, we have both worked together on this for about a year. So we've been working on this pathway, digging deep into the Cambridge courses, their content, and comparing it to our standards for about a year. So it was great experience, but we did spend quite a bit of time working on it.
And I wasn't at the department when IB came through, but that similar process, and that's why it was added to the minimum requirements for state approval rule, where the Cambridge, it's looking at the initial courses, but then that Cambridge, like IB and AP courses, would be available for the districts to actually approve the courses that they wanted to offer.
So we actually dug deep and reviewed the courses that would substitute or not for graduation requirements. So we have reviewed, but more at a very high level, other courses that would be considered electives. So that would be the district's responsibility to dig deep into a Cambridge course that they were going to offer as an elective.
Let me just say this. My kids graduated from an IB program, Cambridge. Colleges love it. I mean, it is like, getting in a university is no problem at all with an IB or, I'm sure, a Cambridge degree. Yep.
This may have been stated and I might have missed it, but what is the process for certification of a teacher to teach these courses?
We have professional development available at 3 different levels, and we are sort of a blend between a couple of the other advanced academic programs already approved for use in the state of Tennessee. Similar to AP, we do not require the teachers go to teacher training. However, it is strongly recommended, and a part of the application process that a school goes through is providing information about how they're going to provide resources to enable their teachers to access professional development. We do offer some professional development online for the purpose of making it accessible to districts and teachers who perhaps don't have
the resources available to travel to wherever we hold the training. We do hold the trainings here in the United States, typically in the Southeast area, to make it accessible to U.S. teachers. We don't make them go to another country or something like that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Is there any data available on how these graduates compare, like an SAT to a SAT diploma?
Yeah, I was just going to say, at the district level, we don't have that yet because we just are dealing with freshmen and sophomore. So at the higher level, I'm sure there may be some data available.
One thing that, with the Cambridge Assessment System being a research organization, they do have kind of international research linking student scores on the AS and A-level exams to ACT, to the different countries' kind of main assessment. And so that's something that's accessible online as well. I apologize, I don't have statistics at the moment, but would be happy to get some more facts on that if that's of interest. I did want to mention with the exam fees, we actually have, we utilize a federal grant for AP, it's the Advanced Placement Exam Fee Grant, to help cover the cost of AP and IB exams for low-income students, but that also includes Cambridge. The federal government has included Cambridge in that, so that's something with the students in Metro Nashville, they'll be able to take advantage of that as well.
Seems to me that this can start to get confusing for parents and students. How do students or parents or counselors decide, whether in Cambridge, IB, AP, regular curriculum, what
that is a wonderful
database
question.
that encourages
Yes.
them to make that decision one way or the other?
And that's, again, part of the reason I'm here, that I work specifically on that early post-secondary pathway and trying to improve communication to our families and schools, because there are so many options. But the most important thing is that we match those options to the students' needs and then also what they want to do next. And so that's something our office is working on and rolling out as soon as next month, some of the initial communication around getting kind of even just an overview of everything that you just mentioned. What do these courses mean? What are the requirements and what can I do with them? And really to help people make more informed decisions.
Okay. Carolyn?
Subject areas that they would not have a Cambridge course, but would have to do in a district. Maybe such a finance course, like all the social studies.
Yes.
Did you not have social studies, or did you all, when you were doing the evaluation, determine that we would better stick with our?
Yeah, so they do have social studies courses, but they do not align with our specific standards. And if we think about that, our standards are also heavily embedded with Tennessee history, those sorts of things as well. And even with the U.S. history is heavily based from the U.S. perspective. And so their courses are more from an international perspective and really doesn't have anything on Tennessee specifically. So there just wasn't an alignment in social studies. And so our students, of course, could take the Cambridge courses and as an elective and part of their program, but they would still need to take our history courses.
Okay. Very good. Certainly appreciate it. Tammy, Emily, thank you. Good job. Appreciate it. Okay, work-based learning initiative.
Well, good afternoon. I am Danielle Mazur, I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for CTE, and I'm going to start us off on work-based learning and then pass the baton on to Chelsea Parker, who serves as the Department's Executive Director on work-based learning. What is being passed out to you right now is actually a bundle. You have a printed copy of the presentation itself so that you'll be able to kind of move through that and then keep that for your records. You also will have a one-pager called a toolbox, and Chelsea will refer to that later in the presentation. Additionally, you have a one-pager that really kind of hits the highlights on the framework of the work-based learning program as it has undergone revision and changes, and in particular the key components of that. And then lastly is a multi-paged FAQ, and that FAQ is simply there for, again, your perusal and then use of that should questions come up while you're out in the field with your constituents and questions do pop up. So as mentioned, I am just going to be the one to kick it off, and then I'm going to let Chelsea, who is much more of the expert in this, take you deeper into the conversation about what we have been doing around work-based learning in the state of Tennessee, and then also the particulars that make up this revitalized program. So as we continue our work around the development of aligned academic career pathways, as acknowledged also by Governor Haslam, it's really the infusion of work-based learning into a student's K-12 experience that really has to become more of the norm rather than the exception within our school districts. And I believe the changes that we have made around work-based learning and where we have really tried to provide an arc of progression speaks well to the interests of what the department is doing and also what the needs are locally and regionally across this state. So as we continue our work, I also want to acknowledge the dynamic shifts that are taking place in terms of what now defines a qualified, educated workforce. And perhaps maybe draw more attention to the bottom of this slide, which really addresses the issue of success in the new economy. There's no one here in this room who is not immune to the conversations that we hear nearly on a daily basis, whether it's from an industry partner, an education partner, an elected official, or another entity who calls out, rightfully so, the greater partnering, the greater dynamics between education and industry, and what does that actually need to look like for our current generation, but also our next generation in terms of that workforce. And so within Tennessee and under the leadership of Governor Haslam, we've had really been a part of proactive focus, multi-agency focus of trying to align a lot of the work that we're doing, and though it seems very disparate at the very beginning, you can find common language and common vision across all agencies, and that's exactly what work-based learning is attempting to do as well, and that's really looking at how do we better address the opportunities of the state across academic skills, hard skills, and then the soft skills, and how you braid that together so that the experience that the student has is much more holistic for that student. And it also is a reflection of really where the state is currently. Right now, we're tops, if not the top state across this nation in terms of investment by employers. In both foreign and domestic, each of those places an expectation on us in the educational system, secondary, post-secondary, but also on our partnering agencies, Department of Labor, Department of ECD, on how do we best meet the needs of that industry partner. So if we're recruiting someone in, that industry partner is naturally going to ask, where is my pipeline of qualified workers? And if you can be able to articulate that well, then you're more likely to land that company coming in. And so though we talk very gently about this relationship, we believe that the hard facts really flow through the processes that we've been undertaking here within the Department of Education, but also, again, with our partners at the post-secondary level and with our economic and labor partners. And so when we look at this, again, our strategy really has to be particularly for us within the department is taking a stance of a braided approach to education where both education and industry are folded with one another and ultimately it becomes that skilled workforce. We have been at this, the Division of CT, as you all know, for a couple of years now, and you have been privy to a lot of the course changes and standards changes that we have felt we needed to make to better position our state with the expectations that needed to fall through in the classroom and then ultimately for that student, what he or she would then have with them as they graduated and went on. And so when we kind of look at this issue of readiness, this is really where, again, work-based learning is going to be folded more into that conversation and more into how do you have a progressive experience for that student and then ultimately capping that because of that progression as they prepare for graduation from high school and then move into post-secondary in their career. So with that, I'm going to actually now turn it over to Chelsea, who's going to do a deeper dive into the actual changes that we've been doing around work-based learning and how it's been revitalized.
So work-based learning is really a teaching methodology to help students gain the career exposure and the valuable employability skills that they need to graduate successfully from high school and go on to future opportunities. And the spectrum that you see here on the screen really is a reflection of the model for how students really progress through work-based learning. And early activities start with things like industry tours and guest speakers in classrooms and giving students broad industry and career awareness to help set the stage for later activities. As they progress, students are then prepared to participate in a more capstone level work-based learning experience during their junior or senior year. Activities are embedded throughout our CTE courses to expose students to critical skills and career options throughout their program of study. The spectrum of learning can start as early as elementary school and reflects truly that K to J or kindergarten to jobs approach to skill development for students, preparing them ultimately for a culminating capstone work-based learning experience. At this capstone level, there are three real fundamental qualities that I want to discuss today that really define the experiences that we want students to be able to have at this high level. First of all, that the experience is truly cumulative, that it builds on the entire program of study that a student has gone through, that it builds on the academic, technical, and soft skills they've established in the classroom. Second of all, that it's self-directed, that it reflects the students' interests and their long-term goals. And finally, that it results in a portfolio where the student walks away from that experience with evidence in their hands of the true skill development that they have, that they could take with them to that college entrance interview or to that job interview in the future, showing what their capabilities are. And this whole model has been developed not only for students, but ultimately at the end of this, our students become that shining example, that product at the end of this work-based learning experience. A shining example of what really students can accomplish in high school. But there was many key roles that play a real important part of this whole process. So I want to take a moment to quickly talk through a few of these that ensure that all students are successful as they participate and are ultimately prepared for post-secondary education and careers. At the district level, you'll see that adequate support structures are in place to support high-quality work-based learning programs. The teachers ensure that the student experiences fold into the classroom work and enable the student to take what they've learned to that next level. That employers and community mentors provide that real-world context for the learning and set professional expectations for the student work itself. And that parents provide that socio-emotional and other key supports to students who are participating in work-based learning. Some very thoughtful work has gone into making all of these components work together. I'd like to walk you quickly through our process to date and then share more details about what we've developed so far. First of all, we started with a statewide assessment process where we did a survey and completed focus groups to help us dive into the challenges and the successes that we were experiencing across the state to better understand them. Second of all, that formed a foundation of knowledge on which we built our subsequent rule and policy changes, our work-based learning policy manual. And we started with the state board rule and policy changes that were recently passed in October, which gave us the flexibility that we really needed to pursue this vision for what work-based learning can and should be. We then really rewrote our work-based learning policy manual to support that vision, developed an implementation guide or a professional development tool, which I'll talk through as well, and wrote work-based learning course standards, which you're going to see for final reading tomorrow. Next, we went across the state and hosted work-based learning preview sessions to share our direction with our key stakeholders. Over 300 participants from all core regions came out to participate and gave us really valuable critical feedback on this process and on the materials themselves and the policy changes that we'll be previewing for all of you today. And finally, throughout the process, our work-based learning pilots, we have 5 districts there on the screen for you, who have been our partners throughout all of this development process, reviewing all materials. These pilot regions represent East, Middle, and West Tennessee, larger and smaller districts, newer and more established work-based learning programs, so we could ensure that what we're rolling out truly is in the best interest of all districts and students across the state. Take a closer look at what some of these changes look like. Currently, our work-based learning course does not have a clear set of standards and relies on each individual teacher to bring what they know and they understand about work-based learning to bear for each student individually enrolled in work-based learning, making it difficult for us to gauge across the state what's actually happening within the student experiences and resulting in very little consistency between student experiences and outcomes across the state. And in essence, we had various interpretations of what work-based learning should be. But now, we have a set of clearly defined learning expectations. This work-based learning career practicum course is the course I mentioned a moment ago. Again, this is the course you'll see for final reading tomorrow, and it focuses on the skills that are transferable truly across industry sectors and are relevant both in post-secondary and career opportunities for students. The standards for this course were written based on the most critical employability skills that we gathered from talking with Tennessee industries and post-secondary institutions. We had over 75 industry partners participate in our focus groups alone to help us deal with this issue specifically. And this course also encourages greater collaboration between the work-based learning coordinator who's overseeing that student experience and counselors and other endorsed teachers within the building to help ensure that the student is truly having that culminating experience that builds on the other courses in their program of study or area of elective focus. And opens, this is actually open to both students who are taking a CTE program of study, but also will serve students who have chosen another academic area of elective focus as well. So what does this really look like? For example, when a student enters high school and selects a program of study, and here on the screen you see a marketing example, they get exposure to career options and professional and soft skills through embedded work-based learning opportunities throughout their courses. Ultimately, the student may participate in a culminating practicum of some sort, which may be either an in-school experience, such as running the school store or running the school greenhouse, or out-of-school experiences such as internships or other practicum experiences that draw on what the student has learned and accomplished throughout their studies. Here you see that career practicum course can substitute for the third or fourth level course to enhance any CTE program of study. And likewise, the student may also participate in work-based learning capstone opportunities through other practicum courses as well that are written to be much more specific to a particular content area. And here on the screen, you see an example of this in the Business and Entrepreneurship practicum course. This approach provides districts with flexibility in scheduling to provide the best work-based learning capstone opportunities available to their students. Next, to talk through quickly some of our policies. Previously, we found our policy guide was very rigid. It was difficult to use, and each iteration and each correction required this board to review and sign off on every iteration of changes. All of these factors working together really kept us from pursuing this really adaptable and responsive policy set that we needed to create and support our vision for what work-based learning could be as a student-centered and learning-centered experience. So we approached our policy development in the following way. All policies had to support students and the quality of their learning first and foremost. So our policies set expectations for rigorous and relevant student experiences. Second, our policies provide clear guidelines for program coordination and planning with involvement from key stakeholders, giving greater flexibility to districts while ensuring that the right checks and balances are really in place. And finally, our policies support regional alignment through a Pathways Tennessee planning approach to provide students with experiences that truly align with the high growth, high demand, high wage job opportunities, not just available in the student's district, but within that regional perspective. Specifically, I'd like to talk through a few significant policy changes with you today that reflect these priorities and the work that we've done to date. And then I'll walk you through a quick example to show the impact of what this looks like in a school. Our new policies connect the work-based learning capstone experience to a student's area of elective focus or CTE program of study rather than limiting that experience to one specific set of standards from one specific related course to ensure that it's truly a culminating experience. Second, our policies encourage school districts to supplement work experience with facilitated in-class reflection time. So the work experience is not just a one-off experience on the side, but there's dedicated time to reflect, to build that quality portfolio and ensure that and demonstrate the depth of learning that has happened. Our policies are encouraging stronger collaboration between work-based learning coordinators and other teachers in the building to ensure safe and robust learning experiences for students, and that the policies outline specific roles that intermediaries can play to help schools build and scale work-based learning programs that align with regional demand and ensure that it's clear what the responsibilities of the district need to be within these collaborative environments. Finally, these policies also allow flexibility in terms of scheduling and assigning work-based learning coordinators to oversee placement. So what does this really look like in practice? What we've seen across the state as we've visited programs, as we've worked with teachers and worked with districts, is that a very, very, very common practice, more often than not, is within a school or within a district, you may have an automotive teacher, for example, who has a couple of students who has gone through that particular program study who are really ready for a capstone level work-based learning experience. Also within that school, you may have an IT teacher and an engineering teacher who also have a few students who are ready to participate in this. And previously what was required was that each of these teachers become a certified work-based learning coordinator to oversee the individual students that had gone through their particular program of study. And previously teachers in districts didn't necessarily have the time or capacity to do this really well. And this certainly is not in the best interest of our students. They either didn't get the quality of experience that they need, or they weren't getting that experience at all. So what we've proposed is that our work-based learning career practicum class, again, the course you'll see tomorrow for final reading, will allow districts flexibility in scheduling and bringing these students together within a single course code, under a single work-based learning coordinator who can facilitate the work-based learning logistics and reflection, who has a greater understanding of child labor laws, including those general ed students who have other areas of elective focus as well within that course code, but understanding that these endorsed teachers still have a very critical role to play in ensuring the success of those students. For example, we know that this automotive teacher who's working with these particular students has really the best understanding of what safety training is required and has provided the adequate safety training prior to placement. So that automotive teacher would then be required to provide that safety training and sign off on that safety training plan. They have the subject area expertise to understand the environment in which that student is going to work. And they also have relationships established with those students. Those students have been through those courses with them, and they have a rapport with those students. So it means more for those students to have also another level of support for that teacher coming alongside them, checking up on them, ensuring that they are truly being successful. This model is new and supports the kind of safe and quality work-based learning experience that we want to see for all students who are participating, and addresses the major logistical challenges that were causing unnecessary barriers for districts and students. Ultimately, this is the approach we feel is in the best interest of teachers, districts, and especially our students. Our newest resource is the Implementation Guide, which is a professional development tool for teachers that helps them unpack all the various components that help make work-based learning successful. This guide provides guidance and tools that teachers need to really help them first build those strong programs that drive rigorous experiences for our students, and then ultimately result in quality skill building experiences for students. This slide includes a few of those tools such as checklists and skills assessment rubrics, a list of recommended portfolio artifacts, and even a rubric for assessing portfolios. But it's really the context and format that makes this particular tool unique. This guide is organized topically, so before, during, and after placement for a student, and it allows the teacher to search topically for the area where they might be experiencing challenges or where they need additional clarification. Teachers can flip to that section, find where they need help, and also access hyperlinks to additional resources and documentation where they might find it most useful. Sidebars throughout the guide highlight Tennessee-specific successful practices across the state and provide additional definitions to add clarity. Descriptions in the text give explanations of successful practices. Ooh. Oh, fix this. And finally, all of our supporting documents will be included in an online toolbox for direct download for the teacher who already knows what they're there to look for. For the teachers who may need to flip through the guide to understand what else can I use to help me with this process, we have other teachers who say, I just need a document that might help me accomplish X. They can go straight to this online toolbox, download specifically the tools that they need to use. And all of this, in your handout, you have that list of the tools that have already been developed and will be included in our implementation guide for our first rollout, which will be launched in March. We'll be able to continue to revise and add to this guide in subsequent years on an annual basis. And finally, to support the rollout of all these great materials and put them actually into the hands of our teachers, we developed a thoughtful approach for getting this into their hands, and we feel as we're well positioned after all of our focus group conversations, our preview sessions across the state, and our pilot group participation to share this broadly with districts across the state. So what will this look like? Essential to this will be our upcoming spring and summer trainings for work-based learning coordinators who need to understand the new policies and the new standards as they're being rolled out. You can see the dates here on our screen. All of these materials and additional supports and decks will also be available through our website for those who can't join us in person for one of these sessions. But it's also going to take ongoing support, and we have two key strategies highlighted on the screen here for you today that I want to talk through. First are regional PLCs that we're launching to support our work-based learning coordinators. Work-based learning coordinators from within a region will be able to come together on a regular basis to explore best practices, to learn from one another, to access and use the resources included in the implementation guide. And these PLCs are going to be co-facilitated by a regional core consultant and a regional work-based learning coordinator who's really an expert practitioner from the area who's familiar with these materials as well. Secondly, a work-based learning leadership council will be made up of those regional work-based learning coordinator expert practitioners. This group will serve in an advisory capacity to the state. They will host trainings for our new work-based learning coordinators, and their participation and leadership in this process will help us ensure that this new model is implemented truly with fidelity. At this time, I know Dr. Messer and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Question?
Yes.
Lonnie?
Question. I just want to thank you. That is very good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Yes, it's excellent, and I'm delighted to see that you're deepening this experience for students. The questions that I have are first around the safety issues in the workplace, and many times when it's you want this opportunity to place a student, you get that resistance from the employers when it comes to safety in the workplace. The age issue of if they're under the age of 18, then we can't take them into the workplace. And then, of course, in the healthcare arena, you have the HIPAA laws. Have you done any research around how we can overcome that barrier so that employers, especially in manufacturing and in the healthcare world, are not saying no to the opportunity, that we can at least overcome that barrier to placement?
I'm going to talk very briefly, and then I'll let Chelsea also briefly address it. The short answer, Lillian, is yes. There are a variety of misconceptions that are out there that employers hold on to that often restrict a student entering into experiences that, quite frankly, they are allowed to go into. Even within the healthcare field, we have clinical internships that allow for students to go into healthcare facilities, whether it's a nursing home or a clinic or a hospital, that gives them that chance to kind of get their feet wet. The other side of that, in what you address on the issue of advanced manufacturing, is actually what we're tackling right now with our Department of Labor friends. And a lot of that also has to do with misconceptions. or under the blanket of the issue of insurance liability. And we do believe that we have some resolutions that will kind of begin to break that down. A piece of that also has to do with identifying industry champions. These are partners who are willing to kind of work with us at the very beginning to set the model and the stage for how this can work within their area. Companies that we're working with right now on that front, Bridgestone, International Paper, Eastman, so as well as Volkswagen. But these are major companies, but all of which whom have a lot of sway with other companies, whether they're suppliers of their product or just simply parts of associations. But let me turn that over just very quickly, Chelsea, if you have anything else.
Sure. What we continue to hear as we address that same question among industry partners is what they'll say is, well, I'm not allowed to work with students under 18. Well, and that's just not true. So there's a lot of education to be done in terms of what actually is allowable. So we're working very closely with our friends at Department of Labor to help address and say, here's what is actually allowable for you, and to help educate employers as to what they can do. So within Tennessee, students can work as early as 14. So our capstone experiences start at 16 because there are fewer restrictions as to the times of day that they can work and things like that. However, starting at 16, there are very few barriers to students, and there are actually exemptions within our state and federal child labor laws that allow students who are in career and technical education programs of study to participate where there may be barriers for other students because of the high level of specific technical skills and safety training that they do have within those courses, and also for apprentices. So we're helping to share this kind of information with districts, with employers who are interested in participating with them, and figure out alongside them how they can address the insurance and other concerns that they have to help protect the students, to protect themselves, and ensure that these are quality and safe experiences.
Great. Another question. When it comes to the placement of the student, if they're willing to do it, you have the other challenges of the best practice and making it easier. When I say best practices, what are companies finding that allow them to do it and plug in successfully? Because we hear resistance in my region. They want the students to be prepared, but I don't have the time, or I don't know how to figure this out. So in your work, are you developing processes or a template, if you will, that makes it easier for the employer to plug in, to be willing to accept the students for placement?
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that will be working alongside these industry champions who can help us figure out and to share what they've done to help protect themselves, to share those best practices out, and then relying on our friends at the Department of Labor, again, to help us push that message out of successful practices that others can use as well.
I would just add, within the implementation guide itself, we actually, for the first time, break down what the roles and responsibilities should be for an employer. So history past, placement might be made, and literally the employer is left wondering, what do I do? What is my role? How do I enhance the educational value of this experience? And the truth is that there was nothing to fall back on. And so under this new revitalization, they will exactly have that. They will have a lot of the ins and outs that will allow them to see what their role and responsibility should be.
In addition to that, if I could add one last thing, there are specific requirements within child labor law that also help protect in terms of the required paperwork to document the safety training subjects that the student has had covered, and to keep those on site at the company and at the school as well. So we've actually streamlined all the paperwork process that teachers have had to figure out in the past into one packet that aligns all required paperwork from a child labor law perspective, from a Department of Education perspective, to make sure that we can adequately document and show what a student's experience has been as they come into that experience to protect themselves as well. So,
thank you.
Going back to what Lonnie said, I want to applaud you on this work. The criticism we received in Shelby County when we recruited election laws, this is exact. I mean, we took tremendous hits. You told us you would have a workforce. You told us you would have this. You don't have any of these things we said. And what you said about health care, where I make my living, you're exactly right. And looking at our future workforce, this will help a great deal.
I think as indicated, this is a great program, a much needed program. I guess my question is relative to deployment. 2 years from now, 3 years, 5 years from now, what percent of our high schools do you think will be implementing this or having this in place?
We're laughing because the rollout is intended for this upcoming academic year. So 15-16 academic year will begin statewide rollout. Because of the work that Chelsea's already been doing in terms of tilling the soil and getting it more ready for the changes, we've actually had a great deal of opportunity to touch point districts, work-based learning coordinators, administrators on these changes and what that might look like at that local level. And we've received great feedback, very positive feedback, and we don't necessarily anticipate. I think the one area where we will continue to always be working on, I don't think it's ever going to stop, will be in the industry partner area, and continually helping and assisting districts, but allowing districts also to stand on their own in terms of recruiting the industry partners that they need to have at that local and regional level. But our intention is to have that roll out, and that's really why we had the 5 districts piloting this year. They're also going to be used at the conclusion of this year, and actually I think we're using them this semester as well, to do peer-to-peer conversation, to do peer-to-peer training across the state as well. So again, kind of using that entry to get to the ground a lot quicker than probably one normally does.
I think another big factor in the success of how broadly this is rolled out is to what extent we enjoy intermediaries coming to the table and helping districts scale this. So what we've heard loud and clear throughout this whole process is that this is a real priority for districts. They want to see these opportunities expanded for their students. So allowing them a clearer understanding of what it looks like to work with an intermediary, to see what other successful intermediaries have done to help bring industry partners to the table and scale these kinds of opportunities is going to be, I think, a big factor in how quickly we see this expand.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Very good. Good presentation. We appreciate it. Good work. And certainly, as we've indicated, something that is very much needed throughout the state, and hopefully you'll have all high schools in this 2 years from now. Good luck. Okay, we're down to questions on the agenda, other agenda items for tomorrow. We've covered several of them here, but are there questions from the board on other agenda items that we have for tomorrow's meeting? Any questions? Yeah, I'm sorry.
3A, the automatic identification rule. Is that what we had discussed earlier?
Okay, 3A is, I think it's no changes since our last reading.
Right, so this is before you on final reading this time, and there are no changes. So the state board, as you know, can automatically revoke a license if an individual is convicted of certain offenses, such as murder and so forth. So this, in this last session, a law passed that added some offenses to a law that said who could be around school-age children and who could be on school premises, and so we added those offenses to our list to align with that new law.
Okay. Okay, good. Other questions? Carol?
Back to 3O. 3C. This has to do with the Community Schools Act legislation that last year passed, saying that teachers who are working in schools could be asked to teach parenting courses after hours and get professional development credit for those hours. So my question was not what it seems to be in a minute, but my question has to do with what that does to that teacher's right to have professional development related to their work assignment as it is. It seems to me that this requirement now requires a teacher to teach additional classes for no additional text. It seems to me it's a conflict in where this is placed. I have no problem with them teaching parenting classes, but I have a problem with them getting professional development for that if that's not part of what they need to be doing for their professional development under our other standards. Does that make sense?
And again, I was not as privy to this on first reading, but I've gotten up to speak with final reading, and just knowing the licensure policy changes that have occurred in terms of how teachers can accrue these CEPs, or professional development points. There's a number of ways that they can accrue those points now, including their evaluation scores. Teachers have a lot of options as to how to accrue those points over the course of the validity period of their license. But I do understand what you're asking in terms of if there's a conflict. If a teacher wanted, I think it would be the teacher's determination. I'd like to Angie to maybe check into the legalities of this for us, maybe before tomorrow's meeting. But in terms of whether they could earn money and use it for PDPs, I don't think that they can. So it would be a matter of the teacher perhaps choosing. And there's an additional question that you're raising about the relevancy in terms of counting it for professional development if it's not. But I think that's one that would be an open question for the board to consider, whether or not they're teaching these after-school classes constitute some of their primary responsibility in a way that we feel comfortable, the board allowing a professional development point for this sort of teaching practice. Or a couple questions.
I think if that was always been part of their responsibility as far as teaching our community, if that became part of their role, that's one thing. But to say this is after school and it will count for professional development, I think it opens up our whole professional development requirement to asking or telling teachers to do all kinds of things.
It's kind of like if it was part of their role, they would be receiving professional training for after-school parental training, rather than what this is doing is kind of treating professional training like a currency. Well, a lot of people are a little suspect of how LEAs go about using professional training, how serious they are about getting the best programs for their teachers. It's not a currency.
We could try to do a little investigating even yet today to bring back to you tomorrow. I'm not sure where this item came from initially in terms of, there was a law that was passed. I might need to do a little bit more homework to try to answer those questions for you. Thank you.
Okay, Liddy?
Section 2C, page 3, number 8. We are 2C, page 3, paragraph 8. I'm just going to make a recommendation, and I think it's fine what's here. 2C, page 3, number 8. I'm just going to make a suggestion. We have using the resources of the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development and Economic and Community Development, investigate. I think a student could also go to a local Chamber of Commerce or Development District. I don't know that they have to go to the state if we think that that's what they should do, but I think there are alternatives and there are other places that they can go to conduct their research locally. So it would just be a suggestion to add that. And then 2G, which is the high school math pilot. It talks about a limited pilot, but it does not talk about, and maybe we don't need to reference it here, but what's the start date, the end date, and then how will they measure its success? Do we know?
No, let me make sure. It's on 2G.
2G. 2G. high school math pilot.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, and thank you, Lily. That was one that I was planning to speak to briefly to provide a little more context because it is a broad item. It was prompted initially by a request out of Hopkins County and the industry partners.
We had a presentation last week.
Correct. In talking with Gary before he left and with Fielding and with other members of the board, in addition to taking the feedback from a stakeholders meeting that was held in late December about this issue, we felt that it was a timely issue to explore as a board and to give, on first reading, permission to begin to develop the process for piloting is all that this item would do. So this would ask the C&I and CTE divisions of the department to facilitate a working group with some of the members from the community and school systems that came together in December to come back in April with a further plan for how to pilot this idea of examining math pathways to align better with industry and with post-secondary. There's a number of things that will have to be really considered carefully for that to be successful, I think, including working with our higher education partners to ensure that these are credit-bearing courses, thinking about how we would assess, again, success of a pilot course. It's not something that can happen necessarily without a lot of thought and planning, and so we wanted to establish a work group with this item, with the understanding that in April we come back to the board, the work group will come back to the board with further information.
Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, I think this item is addressing an important issue that we need to address, but this is just kind of saying that we see a need to address it, and we're going to put a group together and come back to the April meeting with a lot more details, and we may or may not have enough information by that time to move forward with it, but a lot of details have to be worked out. But I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Anything else? Everything else is fantastic, right?
Until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow. Yeah, Wendy's happy, so I guess we're...
I have no questions about the agenda items for the first time.
I wouldn't go that far yet.
You wouldn't go there?
Yeah, right.
That's right. They already answered all my questions.
Okay, we've got the, 3:30? 3:30 meeting with TX. The bus is going that direction. We'll give everybody a chance to, are we going back to the hotel first?
We have time if we want to make a stop on the way for those of you that drove here but want to leave your cars at the hotel. So,
okay, we'll go back to
meet at Maxwell House?
Okay, meet at Maxwell House. And what time do we want to leave Maxwell House? 3 o'clock? Or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll go there now and I'll just hang out and wait.
Okay, why don't we say we'll leave Maxwell House at 3:15. So there's no need to get into the THEC early because they're frequently running over. So. Yeah. Okay.
I've been there.
Yeah, right. It's great.
Right. So where do you live?
I think